Hello, WCA. Mike Amori. How is everyone doing? Real excited about this term. We have some new kids, we have some old kids, and the rest of the story you know. Okay, so what's going to happen this term? We're working on, a lot of things, but in particular, we focused already on week one about developing something called a switch, and that is the ability to turn your concentration on and off. The 12 o'clock kids were practicing those visor and calculating poses. The 2 o'clock class learned about a frog playing a violin wearing a black tuxedo. Can you imagine? That's a chess class? You're darn right it is. We did a lot of cool stuff this weekend. 4 o'clock class, they had their hands full as well. Okay, my friends, here's a game that new student Matthew played on chesskid.com. So one of the keys to the program is at the WCA, we get to see your games that you play online against each other, hopefully, and also against other kids. So Matthew is playing somebody named Snoozing Pumpkin. Gotta love these names. All right. How do we learn from this site? The more you play, the more you start to see patterns that repeat themselves. The people who know the most patterns usually have the best chance to win the game because, let's make a few moves here. D4, D5, Bishop F4. This is called the London system. If I know more patterns than you, I have a better chance to win because chances are, as these patterns pop up in the games, I'm going to see them and you won't. Meaning, if I can take advantage of the pattern, it gives me a huge advantage. For example, let's take a look at this game. Now, Matt, with white, actually lost this. He's won most of his games that he's played online, but this particular game he lost. So he plays E3. Let me just get a few moves in. The London system, by the way, is after D4. These birds like to get this bishop out here and then put the pawn on E3. So they make this nice pawn chain with the bishop outside. Okay, so black responds with pawn to E6. And this is like a queen's gambit declined. If you play pawn to E6, white is purposely locking in this bishop. He didn't really have to. He could have brought it out first. But in this position, black is at least going to be able to develop the dark squared bishop one move faster. Okay, Matthew plays bishop to D3. Black develops. And then pawn C3. This is kind of another pattern to know. In these systems, in the London, they take great care of their D pawn. You see how Matthew has two pawns protecting the D pawn? Let me turn on the lights. You see those highlights? That D pawn is firmly supported, and that pawn is going to act like an anchor for the rest of the game. And then in the future, after Matthew develops his pieces, he'll think about moving one of the two pawns up to break black's center. Okay? So black castles, knight to D2, pawn to B6. And here it's interesting that Matthew is holding out the development of this knight, which is fine. He plays queen C2 first. So he's putting a lot of pressure on this diagonal. His opponent plays bishop to B7, and now out comes the knight. Okay, standard position. All the minor pieces are developed. Knight B to D7. This looks like a master game. This is really very well played so far. Now, you guys that have been at the WCA for a while, let's say you're a kid that's playing in reserve. Your rating is around 800. By now, you have heard a great deal about not moving the same piece twice before you have all of your minor pieces developed. Now, naturally, unless you have a good reason, if black for some reason puts their queen here, then I'm going to move this knight again and take the queen. Okay, but what about moving the same minor piece when your king is encastled? Well, there's really no rule about that. It's basically what you can calculate. So here, now this is a computer game, so I don't know how serious Matthew was about the game, but he plays knight G5. He leaves his king in the center, and he's got obvious pressure on this pawn here on H7. Black was, I think, about 1250, so that would put him in the championship section. maybe on his way to future masters. So the kid with black can play. So he doesn't like Matthew's knight, so he kicks it. And here Matthew plays a nice little trick. He plays bishop h7 check. And I'm saying it's a trick because you better not take that bishop. If you take it with the knight, you get mated in one move. So that's a really nice try. So the king can't take, obviously. So after the check, you either move the king or you get mated. So black moves the king. Now here Matthew makes a mistake. He sacrifices his knight on f7, thinking he has a problem. You see, if the bishop runs away, the knight gets captured. If the knight runs away, depending on where it goes, then this knight can take the bishop on h7. There won't be a mate anymore. So I think he felt he may have been stuck here. Now, he's worse maybe, or at least not winning. I don't think he's really in big trouble, but there's a pattern he didn't know. The more you play, the more patterns you memorize. The more patterns you memorize, the better chance they pop up in your games. He actually had the move. Well, you can pause the video and, I don't know, what would you do here? Any ideas? Yeah. How about this really interesting move, h4? Yikes. h4 sets up the kind of position where black could lose very, very quickly. The most natural response for players in the reserve championship level is to go for the material. Well, if you take the knight, I'm going to take back with the pawn. And as you can see, that opens up this very, very dangerous file to the black king. Black is in trouble here. A grandmaster, a master, anybody facing such a strong discovered check is just like, yikes, this can't be good. Let's do a couple of tactics here. Just what if? Okay, what if the knight went backwards to e8? Well, this is another tactical pattern that you could know, should know, I don't know. Mate in 2. Come on, Sophie, you can do this. Mate in 2. Let's go. Rohan, you guys should snap this right out. You see it? Yes, you do. You just play bishop to g8. Now, why? When you move the bishop to g8, you're putting the king in check with this rook. If you move the bishop this way, that's fine, but what's the purpose of moving the bishop to g8? It's to open up the h7 square. How does black get out of check? Well, pretty much have to take this and then checkmate, right? Okay, let's go back. Here's the position after h4. If they take, you take back. Knight e8, they get mated. Some people who see this position say, hey, what about knight e4? Now, do they see this exact position? No, they don't. I doubt it, but they do see something very similar. A lot of players think they could play knight e4 here, thinking that it closes up the queen's diagonal. But what's the problem with knight e4? I strongly suggest you stop your video and that you can figure this out for yourself. What should white do? Okay, I hope you came up with the move bishop takes e4. So this is the same exact pattern we had a minute ago, except we have to do like a little give and take. First we take the knight, which opens up the rook to the king. There's no way to block that check. So black's only legal move is to play king g8. You guys see that? Okay, do you remember when we played bishop g8? We had this position. The king had to take, and then we mated on that square. Correct? Let's look at the difference here. When we take with our bishop, we force the king to g8. Now, do you guys see how to force that original position from here? Please stop your video. Make sure that you can solve this, okay? All right, the mate, bishop h7. You go back in with the bishop, forcing the black king under the bishop, and then guess what? You just throw the bishop right in there. This is the same exact position we had a moment ago, except there's no knight on e8. The knight got captured on this square. You guys see it? King takes, queen h7 mate. Excellent. Okay, now, I kept repeating and saying the word pattern over and over again. When I went over this game, I found the move h4 off the top of my head. Not because I'm a genius. Well, actually, I am a genius, but, you know, because I'm a genius, I found it. Okay, fine. But how do the rest of us find it? We find it by these little clues that pop up in our heads from seeing things in other openings. So remember, here is when Matthew played bishop h7 check. He thought he had a problem with his bishop and his knight, so what did he do in the game? I don't think I showed you. He decided after king h8 to sack the knight on f7. So this is the game continuation. The rook took, the bishop attacked the rook, and the rook just went back, and Matthew didn't get enough for the material and ended up losing the game. Okay. However, when he had the position after king h8, this is where I suggested, hey, try h4. It may not win. I mean, black doesn't have to take your knight, but at least you're creating some play and the possibility of winning really quickly. Where do these ideas come from? Let's take a look at the Ruy Lopez for a minute. So e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop to b5. Everybody in the 12 and 2 o'clock class should know the name of this opening. This is the Ruy Lopez, R-U-Y Lopez. What happens if you don't know the names? Nothing really until you start hearing it in conversation, and then you're going to have to ask somebody, what is that? The more chess you study, the more these ideas and names come right to the surface, and you get to learn so much faster. Okay, in the Ruy Lopez, one of the main lines is pawn a6. We exchange the bishop for the knight. The d pawn takes back, and why? That's like in case white ever tries to snap off a pawn thinking, hey, I could just take your knight and then win a pawn. Well, you really can't, because after queen d4, black is going to get their stuff back. Doesn't really work out for white. Okay, so let's go back. So that's why after pawn takes, we get castle, which is one of the main lines for white. Well, guess what? Bishop g4, pinning the knight. Pawn h3, attacking the bishop, and lo and behold, if I turn the board around, let's see if I can flip this with my hands. Look at that, perfect. Wow, normally I knock the pieces over when I do that. Okay, now we're black. Does this look at all familiar? At all familiar to this position? The board is flipped now. Do you remember what white played here? Let me flip it again. This is Matthew's game, by the way. Look at that. I'm making everyone dizzy. This is where he had the chance to play the move h4. Okay, let's go back to that Ruy Lopez position. Now remember, we're going to be seeing this from the white side. But if you're black and you get kicked by that pawn, let me turn the board again. Perfect, once again. Guess what? h5 is a move. Can you imagine? Yeah, this is a really cool pattern to know. Does it work all the time? Of course not. You have to calculate that. That's on you. Like the next time one of your pieces gets attacked and you just play h5 randomly and lose the game, don't come to me and go, hey, Mike, you showed me this on the video and I lost. I didn't show you anything. All I'm passing on here are some ideas. When you use them is up to you. What if white takes and we take back? This is maybe survivable for white, but they have to be really, really careful not to move their knight. If they do, for example, if they play the move knight h2, they're in big, big trouble. Stop the video, figure out how in this position black wins. Queen h4. Ouchie. You move the knight, you get mated on h1. If you move the rook to give the king a square, Taking the knight definitely wins the game, but you have a move here that's so rude and so much stronger than taking the knight. I mean, taking the knight's just outright winning, but putting more pressure on this square and threatening mate with like bishop c5 is so rude to do. Game is going to be over very quickly. I'm not going to show you anymore. Do me a favor. I'm glad you watched the video. Do work on chesskid.com. I don't know what to do. Yes, you do. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.